Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we're going to look at different life cycles. We're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are usually more about the emotions associated with your money than the finances themselves. And the healthier one is emotionally, the better decisions they tend to make. Although we might be a little general in our discussion, please reach out. Let's make it more personal and relevant for you. You can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post your comments on YouTube, on Facebook, or any of the other platforms you might be listening to us on. During a divorce, unfortunately, we get really caught up in a lot of different things. Everything is going on. There's paperwork, there's priorities. We got to communicate to our attorney. We got to work with professionals. There's kids, there's changes, there's adapting to the changes. There's a new dynamic in our entire life, and getting used to all of this is difficult, challenging, and stressful often. And too often, I think we don't think about ourselves when we're thinking about everything else. Talking as a reformed self-care fan, I'm not quite sure how to describe myself in this, but I think that one of the most important things one can do for oneself in general, let alone through a stressful process, is to practice self-care. And honestly, I used to think this was kind of weird hippie stuff before my divorce, and it's now 9 years later, I have a very different appreciation for it, and I'm still practicing self-care after all this time. Our guest today is going to help us to understand more about self-care, about the benefits received from practicing it. Margaret Hansen is a transformational speaker, a certified life coach, a writer. She is a trainer in Infinite Possibilities workshops and is a certified practitioner of the emotion code, which is a process to help relieve or release negative emotions that are held in the body. And we do tend to, kind of funny coming from a cold, heartless MBA, CPA, CDFA, but we should listen to our bodies more. They talk to us all the time. And I think that's another big piece that comes from self-care, I think, as well. Margaret, you're also recognized as a top teacher in Who's Who Among American Teachers. So a lot of background, a lot of different experiences coming together to be able to bring to your clients and to the show. And I appreciate you joining us. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Hirsch. I really appreciate you inviting me to join you today.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
No, this is such a, as we were talking about earlier, I mean, it's such an important topic, and not just in divorce and not just, but in an everyday way to kind of start your day, get grounded, get focused. It's always a good way to start your day. And you definitely have a passion and a drive in sharing your message, and that comes from your journey. And yes, that's a pun on your love to travel. But I'm going to ask, can you share a little bit more about your story and where this all comes from?
Oh my gosh, where to start? Well, as you mentioned, I am a certified life coach and speaker and writer, but that came along actually when back in 2011, I was on a trip to Australia, as a matter of fact, and I love travel. I have such a passion for exploring other countries and cultures and things. But I was actually in the midst of a very unhappy marriage. Again, didn't really quite understand why. And my health was not as vibrant as it could be. And I really wasn't feeling as if I was living my passion. Although I was teaching, I knew there was more to my life. So I had a discontent about me that I wasn't fully enjoying being in the present and enjoying the travel, the trip. And I shared this with one of my friends one evening, and he said, "Margaret, have you tried meditation?" So I think we talked about that before, about the importance of meditation and connecting to your heart, to your soul. And so he he said it was a game changer for him. It had changed his life completely. So when I returned from that trip, I actually started meditating. He had given me some names of teachers to listen to, and I started with some guided meditation. And within a couple months, truly, I could begin to feel palpable shifts, not only in my body, but in my life. I could, what I call receive, I began to receive sort of divine downloads, understand things about the universe, understand things about life that I hadn't known before. And I also began to see that we live in a very energetic universe. Everything is energy. We're all created, and that our thoughts do create our reality. And as I began to explore this journey further, I realized that this was a passion for me because everything in my life began to change. I moved from that very unhappy marriage that wasn't going anywhere within about a year and a half, and we consciously uncoupled, and which is fine because we are friends today. But I moved on with my life and am now sharing these principles and practices with others and coaching others. So my health is vibrant. I am truly living my passion and sharing my message. So that's when it actually all started.
I think that's amazing. And I think sometimes getting out of our lives, so to speak, that day to day can give us it or help us get a different perspective. And I'm kind of chuckling inside as you speak, because I had a similar experience where somebody spoke to me. I've got a very good friend, and he actually leads meditations, and it really is very, as you said, life-changing in so many ways. And, I need to ask you, I guess the classic question, you probably get asked all the time is like, what is self-care, right? And we're not talking about shopping therapy, because that's not necessarily the healthiest outlet.
No.
I imagine different people look at it differently. Some people do feel good after they go shopping until the bill comes, or, but I'm going to ask, for our show's purposes, I guess, let's define what we're going to talk about when we say self-care. So let's kind of, give a little bit of a definition, I guess, if we can, related to that.
Well, for me, self-care is actually a form of self-love. It's honoring yourself, your value and worth. And self-care is a mind, body, spirit connection of really feeling as if you are listening to your heart and taking care of yourself in such a way that your life is thriving. When you begin self-care practices, you'll find that you no longer react to circumstances, events, people, things like that. You feel a lot calmer and more centered to be able to respond. Right. So that helps tremendously. And self-care practices can vary from person to person, whatever feels good. I just call it soul nurturing practices. So I'll come up with some examples if you would like, or any that have worked for me, and some suggestions that your listeners might.
Let's before we do that, and I do want to cover that. I think it's important that people understand some of the different things. Why is self-care so important? That what like for your emotion, for your physical well-being, what does it actually do for you when you do self-care?
I feel that when you are actually practicing self-care, it's as if your life exponentially becomes fuller, has more meaning. It gives you drive and passion to continue to, you have energy. You're able to connect with people much more easily. Things start coming into your life in a way synchronistically without you having to try to make things happen. So self-care is really honoring yourself first and recognizing, again, as I go back to my story in Australia, recognizing and understanding through my meditation practice that it starts with you. And when you take care of yourself first, then all else falls into place. So it's really honoring yourself as sovereign, as wise, as having the resources and having the power to be able to create the life that you want. And when you begin to understand that, then
I like that so much because, I work with a lot of clients going through very stressful times, as you do. And, I'll say to them often, because, for example, just one that comes to mind is they feel they have to respond to that text to kind of like show how it is. Well, are you doing that for yourself or are you doing that for them, right? Sometimes you're defending yourself because I need to be right or I need to, whatever it is. And I think when you know who you are and you can respect yourself and love yourself, I think that need goes away because it's not a positive thing when you have to defend yourself or prove yourself. I don't think that's a positive thing. So I think there's more of that happens. The other thing, the classic Maslow, we're not going to reach our spiritual best or our physical best unless our basic needs are met. It sounds like there might be a little bit of a progression according to Maslow, but I also wonder, when we're in this fog of emotion, if we're not taking care of ourselves, do we even recognize how much we actually have in our life that is positive or is, meeting our needs? And I think we sometimes get lost without having the grounding and the focus that might come with that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, that when we are not taking care of ourselves first and even recognizing our basic needs. So self-care can be something as simple as eating healthy and asking our body, what is it that our body needs right now?
Right.
What is it that it really desires? And when you really connect in and can listen to the body, and I teach some practices about being able to connect and hear the body speak to you and tell you what it wants, what it desires, what it needs. Then as you're taking care of those needs, then you don't have to seek outside yourself. It's interesting you mentioned about the text, how we live in such a fast-paced society right now where everything is we're on our phone, we're on our computer, we have a TV going, we have all this stuff going and bombarding us. And it's really important when we get those texts or we get those calls or those emails for us to pull back and to be able to say, do I need to respond to that right now? Right. And do I need to justify why I feel the way I do? We don't.
One of the things I always get a kick out of, and it's coming to what you're saying, is somebody will go away for 2 or 3 days, like go camping or go get a cabin by a lake or, whatever it is. And they come back and it's like, oh, it was amazing. Well, why? I didn't have, my phone with me 24/7, right? It's not, I was out in nature and I had this amazing lake in front of me that I woke up to see sunrise over every morning. Well, it's because we took time for ourselves and we don't do that, and it's not a healthy practice, right? And it's interesting because I wonder, and it's funny because in about 10 days, I'm actually heading to a lake with my son and I want to be very deliberate in being out there without my phone, but I want to be able to bring back more than just I wasn't on my phone 24/7, because I do, as you said, we have this rat race that we're in the middle of, and it's not a healthy rat race by any means,
No.
So I think being able to be deliberate is another thing. Being aware, you said, listening to your body. I think that's so important. If you're listening to your body, you kind of know this is not a good time to respond, or whatever it might be. I need to calm down a little bit. Those are things that I think, we need to listen, be more deliberate with as we go through things.
I agree with you. I really appreciate you bringing that up, Hirsch, because I was just thinking as you were sharing about that trigger response that technology, social media, all of those things do. Right. People, when we scroll on Facebook or we're looking at Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, even watching the news. I don't even watch the news unless it's just maybe a wonderful feel-good story going on in my community. So because we have a tendency, when we're not taking care of ourselves, where we're not connected in with our heart, we have a tendency to react. And it's that fight or flight syndrome that creates the stress in our body, and that stress creates cortisol. And stress is the number one factor of disease and illness. And so really self-care makes complete sense in terms of wellness and well-being. And so I love what you were talking about, being in nature, because I also love to do that too. That's one of my practices, is walking in nature, being in nature, going up to our cabin in the mountains along the river and seeing these beautiful snow-capped mountains. And I feel so incredibly energized by nature. And nature has this beautiful energy to it that we don't need our phones and our TVs and our computers. And it's really good to unplug.
And it's funny because often somebody will like see a beautiful sunset, they'll take a picture and then they'll send it to you and they'll say, oh, but the picture doesn't do it justice, right?
True. That's true.
It's so funny. But, it's funny when you said that you don't listen to the news. I also have really tuned the news out. And I kind of feel sometimes like news used to stand for North, East, West, South. I think now it really stands for never expect wonderful stories, because it's a terrible, and it adds to the anxiety and all the rest that's going on in the world. I think that's not healthy. The other thing is that when we untether, we can be present in something else. And that's something that's very important. For example, I do a lot of budgets with people, and I do them a little bit differently to the kind of traditional. I created a budget specifically. I call it the divorce budget for divorce. Mm-hmm. And 7 out of 10 families as a whole, the statistic hovers around, do not have budgets. And I get it, because they can be daunting, right? And sometimes we can add stress that way. It's amazing when I run through this with somebody at the beginning, how they can be so stressed, and at the end, how they're so relieved. Because I think in some ways it also creates control. And I don't mean that in a, overpowering, dictatorial way. I'm saying being able to take more control of your life, whether that's being more deliberate, whether that's your finances, whatever it is, becomes a much healthier way to live life, I think, as well. And so I appreciate that tremendously as people go through that. I think obviously we've touched on a lot of the things, but I'm going to, since we usually focus on divorce, can you talk about one or two maybe stories that you've seen of people who have gone through a divorce and why self-care was so important, and how it kind of helped them go through that divorce and through that process? And then we're going to take a break after that, and then we're going to pick your brain a little bit on personal experiences. So, but let's start in general with some of the things that you've seen, and then kind of work our way down.
Well, I've gone through my share of divorces, and so have my girlfriends and other friends. And when we are in the midst of the emotional chaos of the desire to separate, unfortunately, it's one of those things that we keep talking about over and over and over and over, which actually, understanding some of these universal principles, it is drawing in more circumstances, more of that like attracts like. And so it actually becomes more chaotic, more stressful. So what we focus on, we are drawing into ourselves. So that's one of the dilemmas when we think what we're doing is we're leaning on somebody to share our story or the chaos that we're going through or whatnot. And they're listening, but they're almost feeding into that fire. And it's actually making it worse. It creates such a frenzy of stress. So I think, one of the best ways is for someone to become aware of the fact that, wait a minute, I'm creating this. Now, oftentimes they aren't when they're in the midst of it emotionally, because it feels as if life is happening to them. It feels as if all these things are happening to them and I'm the victim. Right. And one thing that I learned when I went through my divorce is that when we go through these challenges, we go through these obstacles or these experiences that we might define as negative, they aren't necessarily negative. They are truly opportunities for us to grow and to learn. So if we can see it as a learning opportunity, as opposed to a situation I'm stuck in, or I can't stand it, or how did that marriage that started out so great end up so terrible? It's an opportunity for us to reflect back. Now, sometimes we can't do that when we're all emotionally keyed up.
Right.
But when we can get to a calm place, which is why I love the self-care practices, and look back and say, all right, what was my part in that? What was I to learn in that marriage?
Right.
What do I need to understand about myself so that I don't repeat those patterns in the next marriage, in the next relationship? Because until we learn that we are just as responsible for what's happened,
right,
as the other person, and that it's reflecting back to us aspects of ourselves where we need to learn and grow, we're going to keep repeating that over and over and over until we learn that lesson. And it will get tougher, and those relationships will get more difficult as we go along until you crash up against the wall and go, oh my gosh, all right, I see that the common denominator is me. So what's going on? What is the universe trying to tell me? What is life trying to tell me? Because this is happening and I'm involved in this. And what do I need to learn? So, and I can speak from personal experience, having gone through a few marriages and divorces.
I think we'll do that when we come back. And I don't mean to be rude, but I just have a couple things to add, and then we do have to go to a break.
You bet.
The very first blog I ever wrote relating to divorce, I actually originally called Divorce is Awesome, right? And people were not thrilled with the name. I thought it was great. But it really was exactly what you're saying, that yes, you in the middle of this, and especially in the beginning, it's excruciating and your life has died this miserable death, but there really are opportunities to connect with yourself and others, and in ways that you've kind of lost going through that divorce. The other thing is, I think when you're more deliberate and you're more focused like this, I've worked with clients and I look at them and I'm going, this divorce is going to be their defining moment, so to speak. But it doesn't have to be. And it is challenging, and it is a major life event. I don't want to be insensitive to what somebody's going through in any way. But at the same time, they can realize that this can be something that they can grow from and really kind of have it as their springboard in many ways to live a life that they really want to. And I think that becomes the way that you want to define your life, not the other way. So before we go to break, share with people, how can they reach you, whether they want to email you or maybe go to your website and learn more about what you do and who you are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Hirsch. So those who want to find out a little bit more about me and what I do and how I might be able to help them, if they're interested, they can go to my website, which is Margaret K. Hansen. So that's Margaret, K, the initial K, Hansen, HANSEN.com, or they can write me at Margaret K. Hansen, again, Margaret, middle initials K, HANSEN, the number 3 at gmail.com. And
encourage people to do that and to go to the website, look a little, learn a little, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business show showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact GoingSoloDirectory.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon. We are on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network, and our guest today is Margaret Hansen with the EN at the end. Our topic today is Dare to Self-Care, and we covered a lot in that first half. I'm just going to recap a little bit, and then we're going to dive right back into the show. You shared a fair bit about your kind of searching the world and searching yourself and your background, which was very interesting. And, you know, they kind of make movies about, you know, people going on a journey to find themselves, which was interesting. We defined a little bit of what self-care was, and it wasn't, as we said, shopping therapy, but really, I think learning yourself, getting in touch with yourself, loving yourself were key components to that. I'm trying to read my handwriting here. Benefits of self-care, both emotionally and physically, why it's important while going through a divorce or recovery of any kind, really. And, you know, we did touch on it, but just generally as a basic practice to kind of get out of the rat race a little bit, take time for yourself, be more deliberate in the way you live. Having more than we think sometimes, I think, is an important piece of this as well. Being able to be grateful for what we have, realizing sometimes we have a lot more than we think we have as well. And we're going to get a little more, I guess, practical here. I'm going to tap a little bit into your personal experience, which you offered a little bit at the beginning of the first half of the show. But what are some of the self-care practices that you, Margaret, had found helpful when you were going through your divorce?
Well, thank you, Hirsch, for that question. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, meditation, when I discovered meditation, that was a game changer for me too. Things really started shifting. And sometimes we think, you know, meditation is too difficult, or you have to spend a long time doing it. Maybe I meditate maybe 5 minutes a day. So it can just simply be, it's a quieting of the mind, and you can learn from so many different meditations, whether guided. I started out with guided meditation, and then later I'm able to just simply get quiet and quiet my thoughts so that I can connect into my heart. And when I'm able to do that, then I can actually hear that guidance that comes from my heart, from my soul. So meditation is really important. In fact, I've noticed that on days when I don't meditate, or if I'm traveling and I didn't have the time to, or I had a busy day, it doesn't go quite as well. I definitely notice it. It's almost like you notice if you don't brush your teeth, and I always brush my teeth. So meditation is just as essential. That's one. We also mentioned the importance of being in nature. Both of us love being in nature, and nature itself is truly a beautiful place to feel that natural energy that comes from the earth. And so one of the things I do is I take my shoes off almost all the time when I'm at home, and I go barefoot in the grass. And I love feeling the grass between my toes, and I love smelling the flowers and feeling the wind and listening to the birds. It just oh, it energizes me and it calms me. So being in nature, every day I go for a walk in my neighborhood, or when I'm in the mountains, I'll go for a walk around the lake or in by the river. So being in nature, walking in nature, anything like that. Those are practices that I do. Another one you mentioned and touched on, gratitude. So at the end of the day, so I tend to bookend my day. I start with a quiet meditation in the morning, and then I read something that's inspiring. It could be spiritual wisdom. It could be any kind of reading that can fill my heart and mind and set the tone for my day. So, and that might only be maybe half an hour reading or 20 minutes of reading, but oh my gosh, it makes such a difference, is what we fill our mind with. Then at the end of the day, then I go ahead and I set intention for the day, and then I move through the day. And at the end of the day, I actually have kind of a wind down. So a lot of people have a tendency to watch TV up to the last minute before they want to go to bed, right? Or they bring the computer, or worse, they have the TV in their bedroom. So that bombardment of having TV on and then trying to turn it off and then trying to get into a deep, restful, restorative sleep is almost impossible. So TVs, computers, things like that need to be out of the bedroom at night. And I begin about an hour before I want to go to sleep, where I don't watch any TV. I am off the computer. I put the phone down and I make some chamomile tea. So after the morning, I just drink herbal drinks the rest of the day. So an herbal tea, I might read something inspiring. And then one of the things I did for years and years, and now I just sort of do it out loud, is I say, what am I grateful for today? What are the things that I'm grateful for? And it can be something as simple as, yes, I got up and I had energy this morning.
Yes, it's so interesting you said that.
That gratitude is
right. Yeah. Because that's a practice that I've actually started incorporating probably over the last 2 or 3 years, is to think about one thing that day that really was a little different. You know, I mean, you can, if you want, wake up every day at the same time and lead the exact same life and go through life, you know, just in a blur. Or you can kind of step back and appreciate something every day. And I think it creates such a value and such a more meaning in your life. And in many ways, an excitement almost for the next day, because you know there's going to be something new the next day that does that, right? I was explaining that to a client of mine once. And again, I am very focused on the finance side. And you know, I had forgotten I'd even spoken to her about it. And she said, like 3 or 4 months later, she said to me, I just got to tell you, you said something to me in the very first meeting that we ever had. And I had forgotten, as I said. And she said, I felt that because she had just finished kind of putting her financial affidavit together for her divorce. And she said, I felt that when I sent you the financial affidavit for review. She had this excitement and gratitude that she had really accomplished something. And this was a woman who unfortunately was financially abused a little. She had been cut off from finances and never exposed to them. So she really didn't know fully what was going on. And that's why it took several months to actually put it together. It usually doesn't. But the ability to feel that power almost, or empowerment of yourself to be able to accomplish something that she started off thinking, I'm never going to be able to do this. And that's an enormous growth for somebody to be able to do. And what else can I conquer now? I think becomes such a beautiful thing to think about. So,
yes. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that you have integrated this practice. I think gratitude is a hugely powerful, positive emotion to evoke within your body. Your body loves feeling feeling of gratitude. It
Right.
feels really good. And I used to actually keep a little journal by the side of my bed and write at least 3 things that day that I was grateful for. And the
Cool.
beauty is too, in the next morning, I would say something as I set my intention for the day, something wonderful is going to happen to me today. And I just had this positive expectation that something wonderful was going to happen that day. And it did. So no matter what it was, no matter how small. So those are just 2 things that I do in there. Now there are other self-care practices, and I alluded to this in the beginning, in the first part of our program, on listening to the body in terms of food. So oftentimes when we're feeling stress, and divorce for sure can make us feel really stressful, we tend to try to mask it either through alcohol, or we eat junk food, try to escape or to mask that feeling. And when it comes to food, it is so important that we give our body nourishing, nutrient-dense foods that it loves, life-giving foods that it really, truly loves. And I'm not saying that you can't have a piece of cake or
Right.
have a glass of wine. Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is really listening to and tuning in what it wants and what it needs. And when I began to, I shop for organic, local, and fresh foods, and I love to prepare those foods. And one thing I do also is, again, a gratitude practice even before I eat, and just kind of bless the food and just thank that food for nourishing my body, helping me to feel vibrant and healthy, and the people who had grown these beautiful foods, and before I take that in. There are other self-care practices too that I do. I love to go for a massage regularly. Some people love to do that. So any kind of any kind of thing that just feels good to you. You know, no matter, now I like to shop just as well as anybody, but I found that, again, that's kind of an escape. It's a bit like reaching for the bag of Doritos. It's like it feels good and I can't just eat one. So
Right.
It's a bit like that with shopping when we become shopaholics, or we look for an escape through retail, our retail therapy. It feels good in the moment, but ultimately we end up with a closet full of clothes, most of which we don't wear.
I actually just heard a statistic that the average person wears less than 25% of the clothes they have in their closet. So to your point, and I say to my clients, it's not necessarily specific to clothing, but often, especially the impulse buyers, you should ask yourself, will future me be upset with current me when I get the bill? So I think that's a very important thing. We do have to start wrapping up. I'm just going to ask, though, understanding everyone's divorce is personal, and it's kind of this unique experience. Even if you're living next to somebody with the same kind of house, same kind of car, similar sized family, it's unique. You have your own priorities, your own biases, and everything else that comes with it. What advice would you have for somebody starting the divorce process? Obviously, especially related to self-care, since this is our topic.
Yes, for someone who is just starting to go through this divorce process, and they're beginning to separate and beginning to feel this sort of stepping out onto their own, and what will that feel like, is know that we are all on a hero's journey. And this is all part of the journey that we take. And if they can imagine, so one of the things that I do is I imagine what would I love my life to be like, say, a year from now, and imagine how I would want it to feel, what I would want it to look like, and getting into that space where I have something to look forward to, and understand that even though what they're going through right now feels tough, it's hard, it is temporary. It's temporary. And you will rise above it, and you will get through it, and you will become stronger. So ask yourself, what are the gifts that I can learn in this journey? What are the things that I need to pay attention to so that my life a year from now or 2 years from now will be even better? It'll be extraordinary, and it will.
I like that. I like that a lot. And you're right, it can be overwhelming and it definitely is challenging, but I think even more reason to take care of yourself and build those self-care practices into your day, which I think are so important. Before we wrap up, Margaret, how can people get in touch with you and learn more?
Yes, thank you. So the best way to reach me, you can reach me on my website, which is margarethansen.com, and it is spelled Margaret with the middle initial K, Hansen, HANSEN.com, or they can write me at my email, which is Margaret K. Hansen, MARGARET, middle initial K, HANSEN, the number 3 at gmail.com. So either way is fine.
Thank you. I encourage people to go to look. I know we didn't even get a chance to really dive into your services. So I'm just going to say, I know you do personal coaching, you do workshops, you do retreats. All of them are worthy of looking into, especially to learn how to improve your life, because you're worth it and you should do that for yourself. I am Hirsch Sermon, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please reach out to me through my website. It's lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. You can reach out to me with questions, or for our guest, Margaret Hansen today. CC Schatz, thank you so much for producing the show and making the magic happen to make it easy for me to just sit, have a conversation, and learn new skills that I try to incorporate into my life. And I look forward to everybody joining me on my next show. Have a great week, and thank you for tuning in.